Okay, so we left off at somewhere around 32. All right, so everybody take a look at number 32. Like I said, hopefully you had enough time to, over the weekend, to get some of this done, all right, or at least see what you remember or what you don't remember. All right, the first one should be relatively easy. It's not even a quadratic, all right, but it's designed to make sure that you know the difference between how to solve a quadratic and how to solve something that's called linear. All right, so when you distribute here, you end up with negative 20 plus 8n equals negative 48 minus 40n. So now we have 48n is equal to negative 28. So n is equal to negative 28 over 48, and that just reduces to negative 7 over 12. All right, any questions? Yes.
Never mind.
All right, now for question number 33, again, distributing. All right, when we distribute here, we end up with x squared plus 3x minus 2 equals 2 plus x squared plus x. Now, what's nice about the x squareds here? Yes, they do, in fact, cancel out. So you're left with 3x minus 2 equals 2 plus x. So 2x is equal to 4, so x equals 2. Correct answer for 33 is A. All right, let's check out 34. Which binomial is a factor? All right, so now on this, I always try to tell you guys to remember always to look for what first? GCF. All right, what's common? 5. All right, so here we go. 5. 16y squared minus 24y plus 9. And now you're factoring that. 4y, minus 3, and minus 3. Everybody okay with that? Anybody? So now I have 4y minus 3 is the factor. Any questions? Any questions? All right, here we go. Now, this formula is actually the height of the ball if it's been hit at 56 feet per second. Now, you want to know when it's reached a height of what? 49. So you're supposed to set that equation equal to 49. So negative 16t squared plus 56t has to equal 49 feet. That's what you're looking for. Everybody okay with that? And now it's just a quadratic. So we're going to set the quadratic equal to 0. Now remember, I always say it's easier if we make the leading coefficient positive. So I'm going to move the negative 16t squared over to the right. So it's going to be 16t squared minus 56t plus 49 equals 0. Everybody okay with that? And now it's just what? Factoring. Four t and 4t. 7 and 7. That's 28, and 28 makes 56. If they're both what? Negative. So now it's just 4t minus 7 equals 0. So t is equal to what? What fraction? Good job. 7 over 4. Be careful. 7 over 4. Which is the same as 1 3/4 of a second. Any questions with that? All right. Now, factoring completely. Remember, when you factor completely, that just means that generally there is a GCF. All right. So in this case, what is the GCF? 2. So here we go. 2 parentheses n to the 4th minus 5n squared minus 36. Do you have any questions with that? But now n to the 4th, all right? 2 sets of parentheses, so it has to be what? N squared and n squared. Now what are the factors of 36 that make 5? 9 and 4. And then you want the 9 to be what? Negative. Now can you factor n squared plus 4?
Yes. No.
No, but you can factor.
N squared minus.
Yeah, so it's 2 parentheses n plus 3, n minus 3, n squared plus 4. Anybody have any problem with that? All right, here we go. Now remember the roots, underline roots, and then you can say where the graph crosses the what? X-axis. Where the graph crosses the x-axis. So I need to find the x-axis. So I'm going to highlight the x-axis for us so you can see it. Everybody agree that's the x-axis, right? So that's the x-axis. Everybody agree with that? Now what I want you to do is this right here and this right here is where it crosses the x-axis. So those are the roots. So what are the roots? Yep, -1 and 3. All right, -1 and 3. Anybody have any questions with that? Anybody? Okay. Okay, so now again, I'm going to highlight the x-axis so we can find it. All right, then this point right here is a root, and this point right there is a root. So everybody see that?
Wait, the last one? How did you get -1?
Isn't this -1 and isn't this 3?
Oh, you're just okay.
Right? It's just the x coordinate. Just the x coordinate. Good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, is there a 0 between 1 and 2? Is there a 0 between 2 and 3? Between 0 and -1? Or is it between 0 and 1? Here's 0 right here. Here's 1. So it's got to be between there. 0 and 1. Everybody okay with that? All right, here we go. Now remember, find the value of c that makes it a perfect square. Remember, the rule is you always take half of the middle term and square it. That's the c value. All right? So that just becomes what? 25/4. Everybody agree with that? And then 25 divided by 4 is what? 6.25. All right, so if you've forgotten that now, you should know how to do 43. So what? Somebody tell me the correct answer for 43.
16.
Yeah, 16, right? Because 8 divided by 2 squared is 16. All right, now the next thing I usually try to tell kids, it says solve by using the what here?
Okay.
Is it a multiple choice test? Does it matter how you solve it then? Makes no difference. Right, is everybody with me on that? You can use your calculator, you can use completing the square, you can do quadratic formula, you can do factoring if you want. It doesn't matter. All right, but because it says using quadratic formula, we're going to go ahead and do that. All right? So now remember, everybody write down x equals -b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Everybody agree with that? Any questions? So now we plug in. So x equals -3 plus or minus the square root 9 minus 4 times 2 times -5 all over 4. Any problems with that? And so now what? -3 plus or minus the square root of 49 over 4. Everybody good? And so from there, -3 plus or minus 7 over 4. So now what's -3 plus 7? 4 divided by 4. So, or -3 minus 7, -10 fourths, which is, right, -5 halves. So my correct answer here is what? A. Any issues? All right, let's move on. Bob tosses his basketball on the ground from his treehouse. He tossed the basketball with initial downward velocity of 8 feet per second. The equation represents the height of the basketball after t seconds. How long does the basketball take to hit the ground? Right, now do you think if you're throwing something out of a tree, it's going to take 20 seconds to hit the ground? Right, it's quick, right? So it's probably not D, and probably not what? Probably not C. This does take 9 seconds for something to fall, even from a high distance. Do I agree with that? All right, so now we kind of cross those out, but we'll see. So when does something hit the ground? At what height will it be at when it hits the ground? Yeah, it'll be at 0, so you're just setting it equal to 0. Now, what I want to do is, instead of solving it, I want you to be smart. Let's just plug one in real quick. If I plug one in, I get -16 minus 8 plus 20 equals 0. Is that pretty close? Yeah, but is it 0? No. So it's probably what? It's probably 0.9. All right, because it's pretty close to 1. All right. Now, if you want, just take your calculator and let's do -16 times 0.9 squared minus 8 times 0.9 plus 20. Can somebody tell me what that is about? Come on, let's go, let's go. Everybody do it, give it a shot. You should be practicing using your calculator, not letting me do all the work, just like you should be copying things down. You should have already done the work and you're kind of checking your answers. So type that in. Is that pretty close to 0, somebody?
Yes, -0.16.
Yeah, -0.16. So that's pretty close. All right. So the correct answer there would be 0.9. But everybody else, verify that, please. I'm going to try to review with your calculator something today. Is that good? Again, your calculator is really powerful, so make sure you're using it. Anybody? May I have any questions with that? All right, so now on 46, solving. It says solve by using the what? Quadratic formula. But would I solve using the quadratic formula when I look at my answers? That just means it can what? It's easier to factor it. I'm not going to use the quadratic formula on that if I can just say, well, it's real quick to factor. So here we go. X squared minus 8x minus 33 equals 0. Factoring. So x and x, what would that be?
Minus 11 and plus 3.
Beautiful. Minus 11 and plus 3. So x is either what?
D.
11 or negative 3, which is in fact D. Thank you. Any questions? Now, look at number 47. Does everybody see? Just by the answers, we know that it can't factor. Does everybody agree? So now I think it's easier to use the quadratic formula. So here we go. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if I do negative b, that will be x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus 4 times negative 1 times 11 all over negative 2. So inside the radical here, negative 3 plus or minus the square root of what? $53 is what I got. So now we know the correct answer is negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 53. There we go. We knew right off the bat it couldn't be C because we can't have a negative under the radical. All right, now let's take care of 48. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4. Be careful. Negative 1 times 5 all over negative 7 plus or minus the square root. Somebody simplify that. What does that become? I think that's correct. All over negative 2. All right. So correct answer is what? I think it's D. Anybody have any problems so far? All right, here we go. 49. Now again, I would factor this. X squared minus 7x minus 8 equals 0. So that factors to minus 8 and plus 1. So x is either what? Yes. So the answer is D. Now once again, I always look at my answers to see the best way. Obviously this is going to be factoring. Alright, so here we go. Factoring that becomes we're thinking plus 3 and minus 1. So x equals
Oh, wait a minute.
negative 3 or 1. All right, here we go. Now, 51. Here we go. Look at 51. Now, for 51, we set it equal to 0, so 3x squared plus 8x minus 1 equals 0. Now, everybody should be able to tell me that does not what? That does not factor. Okay? So, now, does everybody agree we have the decimal answers, right? So now, I want everybody to go to your calculator because we'll review how you can double check it quickly on a calculator. So I need everybody to go in and type in under y1, 3x squared plus 8x minus 1, and just look at the graph. and tell me where it crosses the x-axis. And if I'm not mistaken, it looks something like this. Now the object is to be able to look at that point 1 and decide whether that point 1 is that positive or negative.
It's positive.
It looks positive, doesn't it? Does everybody see how simple that is with your calculator? All right, it's easy to find the solutions. So the correct answer had to be what?
B. C.
Which one? I think it's C, right? Because this over here is negative. And that's, if you look carefully, that's between -2 and -3. So the only one between -2 and -3 is -2.8, and then it was positive 0.1. This 0 over here was positive, and this one over here was negative. All right. Any questions? Any questions? All right, now here it says solve by what? Completing the square. So we're going to review how to solve by completing the square, even though it's easier just to do what? Factor it. All right, but let's review completing the square. So now we have x squared minus 14x. We're supposed to leave a space equals -24. Everybody good with that? And then what's half in square? Remember, you always take half of 14 and square it, which is what? 49. And now don't forget you have to add the 49 to the other side. Now you refactor that into x minus 7 squared is equal to 25. And now you do what? Take the square root of both sides. So x minus 7. Don't forget the what? The plus or minus. So x is equal to 7 plus or minus 5. And so what's 7 plus 5? What's 7 minus 5? 7 minus 5 today is 2. So my answer is what? C.
Oh, wait. Never mind. I said it.
All right, we're going to do one more anyway, just to be sure.
I thought it was.
All right, here we go. So let's take a look at 53. So again, x squared minus 14x, leave a space, equals -19. Half and square. Somebody tell me what that is. Plus 49. Plus 49. Remember, that's just half of 14 squared. So now, x, remember it always factors into whatever the half was. So it's x minus 7 squared equals 30. Now you take the square root. So x minus 7 equals plus or minus the square root of 30. And then from there, x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 30. Correct answer was C. Yes. I factored it. Remember, it always factors into whatever the half was. It always factors into whatever the half was. Okay? All right, so let's try 54. All right, so 54 again. X squared plus 16x, leave a space, equals 7. Half and square. What's half of 16? Squared. So I think we're doing plus 64 plus 64. So again, 16 divided by 2 squared is where we're getting that number. Now, how do you factor x squared plus 16x plus 64? Right. So x plus 8 squared is equal to 71. So now x plus 8 equals plus or minus the square root of 71. And so x is equal to negative 8 plus or minus square root of 71. Anybody have any questions or concerns? Questions, questions, questions. All right, let's take a look and see what 55 says. All right, everybody do that by using the quadratic formula real quick. Hurry up, quadratic formula. X equals negative b, so what does that become?
3.
3 plus or minus the square root b squared, which is 9 minus 4 times all over what? All over 2. Any questions? All right, simplify the radical. That becomes x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of what? All over. Correct answer? D. All right, here we go. For question number 56. What would C be? What would C be? 25, right? Again, to complete the square, half of 10 squared. All right, 25. So 25 is what would make it a perfect square. All right, now for whatever reason, a lot of kids forgot 57. Or it's already factored for us. So because it's already factored for us, we just have to set the factors equal to 0. So we are doing 3n plus 6 equals 0. 6n minus 3 equals 0. So solving that, 3n equals negative 6, so n is equal to what? Negative 2. 6n equals 3, n equals what? 1/2. So correct answer is?
C.
I think C is good. Any questions? All right, 58. Now we got to be careful because it's a quadratic. We got to set the quadratic equal to 0. So we have 12d squared plus 27d equals 0. Now once again, we're always looking for the what? GCF. What's the GCF?
3D.
Yeah, 3D.
3D.
All right, so we're doing 3D. Factor out that. That becomes what?
4D plus 9.
4D plus 9 equals 0. Now we set the factors equal to 0. So 3D is equal to 0. 4D plus 9 equals 0. So D is equal to 0, or D is equal to negative 9/4. So correct answer is what? A. Any questions? All right. What's the problem with number 59? Yes. We can divide everything through by what? 2. So then you're going to say 6x squared minus 7x plus 2 equals 0. And then we're factoring that. And then when you factor that, middle factors for 6x squared, 3x, and 2x. Now again, where does the 2 have to go for the other factor? On the what? On the left side. So we're going to put a 2 here and a 1 here. Then we're going to kind of smiley face 4x and what? 3x makes negative 7 if they're both negative. All right, now once we do that, we set the factors equal to 0. 3x minus 2 equals 0. 2x minus 1 equals 0. So x is equal to, or x is equal to 1/2. Everybody okay with that? All right, so now we'll look at 60. It is a quadratic. So because it's a quadratic, everything must be set equal to 0. All right? So if we set it equal to 0, it becomes 8y squared. Subtracting y from both sides, so that makes it negative 13y. And then you subtract 10, which makes minus 6 equals 0. Come on, we're almost done. All right, anybody have any questions with that? Now let's break that down. And if I start with the middle factors here, it looks like 4y and 2y. But that would not be correct because there would be no place to put the 2 with the 6, right? So instead of 4y and 2y, it has to be what? Right, it has to be 8y and y. Now with 2 and 3, where would the 2 have to go?
Right.
On the right, and 3 would go on the left. So now this becomes 16 and 3 make negative 13
Minus 2.
minus 2 plus 3. All right? So now set the factors equal to 0. 8y plus 3 equals 0. Y minus 2 equals 0. So y equals negative 3/8 or y equals 2. So correct answer here is B. Thank you. Correct answer was B. All right, here we go. All right, good. 61. We're almost done. All right, again. All right, here we're just factoring. Don't forget GCF. All right. So the GCF in this case is what? D. So then that becomes 36d squared minus 121. And then we're factoring. So D, 6d minus 11, and 6d plus 11. Now there are going to be 3 answers again because it's to the 3rd power. So I have D equals 0, 6d minus 11 equals 0, 6d plus 11 equals 0. So D is equal to 0 or 11 over 6 or negative 11 over 6. So correct answer here is what?
C.
C. All right. Anybody have any questions? All right. Now, your homework. All I want you to do for homework is, listen, please, because I want you to do really well. And I think the exam's going to be relatively easy. It's just a repeat of these problems, right? So the best thing for you to do tonight is to look over these 61 problems and maybe find one that you don't know how to do. And then in class tomorrow, what we're going to do is to say, okay, we're going to look at these 61 problems. Anybody not sure about anything in particular, or something in particular they'd like for me to review? Anybody have any questions? So that's what your job is to do right now. It seems like we get out at what time?
27.
We get out at 27. So we have like 5 minutes. Please look over your notes, all right? I don't want you messing around with the video games, all right? And some of you guys still, when I tell you, all right, there's going to be some problems, all right? I want you looking up some information. Look through these 61 problems and just see if you understood everything that I said. And if you didn't understand everything I said, then tomorrow I'll address that. And then we'll start the next 2 chapters. All right, any questions?